Good evening, greetings, Twitter, X. I did this live a few minutes ago, and when I tried to review it, it was not playable on my profile, so I decided to redo it again. Greetings. I wanted to take this time to talk about the news of the day this Saturday, and that is the acquittal of Attorney General Ken Paxton. He was acquitted on each and every one of the articles of impeachment that he was being tried for. And I wanted to give my respected opinion or my view as what I thought of the impeachment trial and everything that went on with respect to it. I tried to watch as much of it as possible. I wanted to, observe and absorb every detail of the evidence that was presented. And I wanted to, in the process going into this, I wanted to be as open and as objective as possible. I've never tried to be biased in any way, shape, or form. I simply try to point out the facts, the way I objectively see things. And with this impeachment trial, I'm basically trying to do the same thing. From the very beginning, there was a key phrase that the lieutenant governor said, and it kind of stuck with me, and I imagine a lot of Texans throughout the proceeding over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and seeing the ending today, I was reminded of it, and it kind of made me rethink this whole trial, and made a lot of things very questionable. The lieutenant governor said at the very beginning that this was going to be a political trial. Now, after seeing all this, I remember this, and I'm like, okay, well, why would he say that? Did he know something about the proceedings before they actually happened? I mean, it's kind of very questionable if you think about it. It's not something common that, you would tend to think or say about a due process event, in this case, a trial. But why would he say this is going to be political? He knew something that we as Texans probably didn't know. What that was, we may never know. Well, the trial began. Prosecution gave their evidence. They were very detailed in the entire scope of evidence that they gave, both the testimony and the printed evidence that they presented. It was very detailed. It was very informative. There were certain things that in what they presented that were so factual that there was no, in my opinion, there would have been no way to make it, to dispute the credibility of it. Okay? The prosecution did a pretty good job of trying to denounce the evidence, the testimony. But, I mean, there were certain things that they did that were very questionable. The defense attorney, I believe his last name is Cognell, I'm not certain. And even Anthony Busby said they denounced the testimony of certain individuals that was, I would think, kind of surprising. And I know that a lot of politicians that knew this specific witness, and I'm referring to David Maxwell, wouldn't have been not too happy with the words of choice that these defense attorneys used or employed. The closing arguments, I didn't get to see much of the prosecutions, but I did try to see it recorded after the fact, and it was very thorough, very detailed in the sense that they did their closing argument, presenting it with video clipped evidence. It was a very, very well thought of process for their closing argument. The defense, not so much. The defense, they're like, okay, it's not credible, you can't believe it. It's not credible, you can't believe it. Bada bing, yada yada. They did not, in a detailed manner, did not dispute anything that was said in the prosecution's closing argument. I found that kind of questionable, and the reason I say that because if you're going to do a closing argument and the prosecution is throwing all this stuff out in their closing, you want to deflect in your closing arguments. You want to dispute what they're summarizing. That was not done specifically in this instance. The closing argument to me was very generalized, very arrogant, and it left me thinking, okay, well, made me wonder if there was something suspect about this proceeding when I heard it. The vote was very consistent. Consistent in the sense that it was always a Republican majority that voted to acquit. There was only 2 Republican senators that actually voted to convict each and every time. That consistency, as I said. And in that consistent majority, there was a couple of senators that really stuck out to me because I know for a fact who they are. I know their political history. I know their, I don't want to say extreme, but their very direct stance on certain issues with respect to certain political issues that lead me to believe that their stance is not so ethically correct. I'll leave it at that. But the fact that they consistently voted to acquit in each and every one of the articles of impeachment kind of made me think that maybe there's more to the vote, more to this set of jurors than meets the eye. I don't know how else I could put it, that even Paxton didn't show up for the vote. One could say he was utterly competent at the end result. Is it possible that maybe he knew this was going to happen? Which, if that's the case, then that means that all this event of this impeachment trial was a fix from the beginning. I don't know. I would think if you are the defendant, you want to be there because you want to know what your future is going to be. In this case, he didn't show up. Apparently, he didn't care and the question is why? Did he in fact know that he was going to be acquitted? How could he have been so sure that this was such a sham and that he was going to be acquitted unless he knew beforehand what the outcome was going to be? It's a kind of a thing that you really start thinking about it when you start to analyze it. Now, a lot of the comments online have said that it's over. It's over. He's reinstated. He's got the victory. I would say not so fast. And the reason is because that he's got an investigation over more than one investigation. I'm not certain He's got the securities fraud case, that lawsuit that he's being charged on, and the whistleblowers, which is the most important one, I think, of the three, in the sense is the fact that the Texas House never gave him the funding to pay the settlement. So, because there was no settlement, these whistleblowers can go back on their agreement, technically, and do whatever it was they were going to do, which is either sue him or go back to the feds and try to push the federal government to further investigate Attorney General Paxton, which could ultimately result in him being arrested, tried, and convicted in the federal courts rather than in the Senate impeachment or in the state, because now he would be dealing with federal violations. So he's not out of the woods yet, by any stretch of the imagination. Now, let's say, for sake of argument, that one of these three events he gets blamed, or he gets convicted or whatever, he's found guilty. If it's the whistleblowers or the federal investigation that they've initiated, and the outcome is opposite the outcome of this trial, not only is Paxton obviously going to be in a whole mess of trouble, mind you, it is going to put a whole deal or a whole thing of, it's going to put a lot of scrutiny on the Texas Senate. It is possible, and I say this because it's unprecedented. If this could happen, we don't know, but it's highly probable or highly likely that if the federal investigation goes sour for Attorney General Ken Paxton, that certain individuals in the Texas Senate could be investigated, possibly, for covering up the crimes or the allegations that were made against Ken Paxton by the fact that they acquitted him. They could be seen as, what's the word I'm looking for, co-conspirators. They could be seen as, I can't think of the other word off the top of my head, but involved parties. Because the federal government can say, okay, he should have been convicted, or not convicted. He should have been found guilty of the articles of impeachment. He did not, because these jurors were tainted, and they voted in his favor. This is all unprecedented, but there is a remote possibility. We have to be aware of that. We have to accept that. But whether or not that happens, what will happen is that the Texas Senate will be under, and possibly remain under, a great deal of scrutiny because of a decision like that they acquitted him when in fact the federal government did not. It's going to be really interesting to see how these chain of events play out, because he's acquitted right now by the Senate, but we don't know for a fact in the other instances that he's got to deal with how he's going to come out, if he's going to come out clean or not. So we have to wait and see. I honestly was not too pleased with the end result of this impeachment, because out of all the evidence that was presented, the prosecution's case was so well planned out, so well elaborated, that there should have been at least a conviction on one or two of the impeachment articles. And there was not. The fact that he fired the whistleblowers, in my opinion, so soon after they went to the FBI, I don't see how the Senate could have found him not guilty or could have acquitted him on that article, because of the fact that how do you dispute the time factor? As they said in numerous occasions throughout the impeachment trial, there are no coincidences in Texas, in Austin. How do you arrive at the conclusion that he didn't do that out of spite and out of retaliation? So soon after they took him to the FBI. It's hard to. And another thing also is you have to understand unfortunately, the political reputations of both the Republicans and the Democrats right now in this day and age, especially the Conservative Party. They are more retaliatory now than ever. You know, if we look at everything that's happened, not only here in Texas but nationwide, it's the Conservative Party that, in my opinion, seems to be more retaliatory than the Liberal Democrat Party on a lot of topics. So how do you knowing that arrive at the conclusion that, okay, well, because he fired him immediately, he's not necessarily retaliating? The only way I would believe that you could find that is if, in this case, you're associated with that class of or category of individuals that retaliation doesn't matter to you. That's the way I see it. I mean, a lot of these senators, in their political beliefs, are way more retaliatory than they should be. And I'm gonna go and give you some examples. Senator Betancourt retaliated politically against Harris County for the elections. He may not want to admit that, but he did. The reason being is because of the laws that he introduced, the bills that he introduced, and the laws that got passed that were specifically aimed at one county in Texas, Harris County. How can you say you're not biased or you're not retaliating against a specific location or a specific person when the legislation that you are advocating clearly has only one set focus, and that is Harris County? It is hard not to make that assumption in this case. Now, I'm not talking about the fact, and you're probably going to say, okay, well, if you are defending Harris County, then you're defending election fraud. I'm not touching the election fraud issue. I never touched it. My point is, when you pass the legislation that retaliates or affects only one major county in Texas, there's no way you can't make it not appear as being retaliatory. Okay? Regardless of whether the bill or the law that you passed is in the right, that's irrelevant to the fact in this case, from my standpoint. So that's one example. The other example is, I believe, him and Brian Hughes and some of the other senators were the ones that were really advocating and I think originated some of the writings for the laws that are anti-abortion. And I don't want to touch on the content of the bills, but the fact that they affected. Well, actually, let me go. Let me put that aside. Let's do this. There was a lot of bills or a lot of actions in the Texas legislature that made these individuals look retaliatory. So, and when you appear to have that persona or that how do you explain that character, shall we say, inferenced on your persona, it's hard to defend against it. And this is the case with the Republican Party, that a lot of them have been retaliatory to the effect, and the evidence on the national scale or the national level is very evident in the recent events of the impeachment inquiry against President Biden. But I'm not going to go there. But suffice it to say, they are retaliatory, and this makes it that much more difficult and a lot less credible that they would acquit him in a clean and orderly fashion, and that's what makes this even more so questionable, in my opinion. Well, we have to wait and see exactly how this is going to turn out with these investigations, the securities fraud, the whistleblowers, because now that it's over and the whistleblowers did not get their settlement, the ball is in their field as to how they're going to proceed. Are they going to continue with the lawsuit? Are they going to continue to deal with the FBI and further the investigation against Ken Paxton? Only time will tell. And I think I've used that phrase sufficiently on X today, on Twitter, in all the comments that I made. Time will tell where this is going to end up. So the game is not over yet. Attorney General Ken Paxton can breathe a sigh of relief for the moment. But, he may have won this battle. But using the proverbial phrase, he has yet to win the war. We'll have to wait and see. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope that now this is playable on X, because the one that I recorded before this, I had a lot of difficulty trying to play it back myself, and I made me think that if I couldn't play it or I couldn't view it, you guys probably couldn't have viewed it either. So, but I'm going to look at it and see, and if this doesn't work, then I will redo it at another time and to talk about this. But I feel good to be back here in my office after having it remodeled. It was an ardent endeavor to do this, but it is much nicer. Let me see if I can give me a second, because I've got to move my cameras here. But I'm going to try to make this, if I can flip this camera so that you can see the color scheme here that I did. Give me a second here, because this is not behaving the way I want it to. I'm trying to flip it, and it's not letting me selfie. You can see. Okay, hold on. Give me a second here. I flipped the wrong thing. Well, technology is just not working for me here. So technology is not working for me right now. So, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'll show it to you guys at a later date. In the meantime, y'all have a good evening, and I hope to see you with more live tweets live X's this week. Next week, I've got a lot to talk about it. Now that I have a space now to do it, I'm going to try to do it more frequently. So y'all have a good weekend. Enjoy your